So it's been a minute since I did one of these, but yes, welcome to another book review. I was going to do this outside originally, but weather is pretty shit as per for, England. I'll probably go back out in the summer, but for now, we're sticking in here. So the book we're looking at today is Atomic Habits by James Clear. This book had been on my list of things to read for well over a year before I got around to reading it. And a lot of the stuff in the book were concepts that I had already been slightly familiar with. But before we start, I'm just going to say definitely would recommend this book. It is a very good read. It's not too long. It's got a lot of cool ideas in it. And seeing as it's still early in the new year, it's good to read something that's all about the idea of having new habits, making these new habits and then sticking with them, and then also finding the habits that are the destructive, negative habits, finding those ones and then getting rid of them. I think having the ability to do those two things is very important. So I started reading this in, I want to say around October of last year. I did finish it at the end of December. It's taken me a while to get around to making this video, but I thought, might as well start it now, and then I can get on with some new books and learn more things. Throughout my time reading, I was taking a lot of notes on each chapter, just writing down the basic points and things that I could take away from those chapters that would benefit me. So one of the main points that James Clear makes throughout the whole book is how it's the small changes that we make that make the most amount of difference in our lives. A lot of people go into, say, the new year, for example, with these big new ideas. Like, they'll go through the entirety of the last year having, for example, gone to the gym about once a month, and let's say that they want to increase that. So they'll go into the new year and they'll think, you know what, I'm gonna go to the gym and I'm gonna be going 4 or 5 days a week. Having gone from such a small amount to such a big amount, whilst that sounds very good and it's a good way of motivating yourself, it's quite like, yeah, I'm going to set a high goal, I'm going to smash this goal. That's not the best way of going at things. If you're going to progress in anything, it's better to do the small steps that then over a longer time get you further than trying to set yourself with a really high goal and then maybe committing to that for a week or two, falling off the wagon and then giving up with it. So the name Atomic Habits, what that actually means is that the habits are so small, they're at an atomic level because they're so small, but having so many of them building up, stacking with each other, comes to something a lot bigger. Another point that I really like, which is something that I truly believe in, is how our own view of ourselves really matters when it comes to forming habits. And also the same for breaking habits. For example, a smoker, someone who has been smoking cigarettes or vaping, possibly more likely in this day and age, but let's say they've been doing that for the last 3 years. If one day they decided, you know what, I'm just going to try and quit. I'm going to quit completely. I'm going to try and stay away from them as much as possible. As much as that is a great idea, and that cutting them out completely would be great, there's two issues wrong with that. Firstly, there's the issue that I mentioned a minute ago, which is that you have to start small. You can't just go from having one thing around and then having it gone completely, because for as much as that sounds good, it will not work out in the long run. People might go for the week, they'll be like, yeah, I've quit, I'm not smoking anymore, this is great. But then, because they've gone from so far one end to the other, it's going to swing back again very quickly. The second thing is, if they don't change how they view themselves, it's not going to work either. If someone decides to stop smoking, they go out to the club, for example, and they go out into the smoking area because their friends are there. They're just there for their friends. They don't want to smoke. But they go out there, someone offers them a cigarette, and they say, oh, sorry, I'm trying to quit. That is the wrong way of looking at it. Because you're not telling your brain any concrete facts. You're not thinking of yourself as someone who doesn't smoke anymore. You're thinking of yourself as someone who is trying to stop smoking, which is making it a lot more easy for yourself to give in and be like, oh, it's all right, I'll just have the one now, like it's not that big of a setback. That's the main issue. If instead, when you were offered the cigarette, you said, sorry, no, I'm not a smoker anymore, or not even anymore, I'm just not a smoker, they're not going to press you. No one's going to be like, oh, go on then, you did, because they know that you're not that. And in your mind, the more you say it, it's like a positive affirmation thing. The more you say the thing, the more you believe it. Which is kind of the fucked up thing about human brains, is that we kind of just believe what we're told over and over again. So the more you believe in this new identity for yourself, the more likely that you're going to commit to those habits. The way James Clear goes on about how to build the habits, I think is really well done, because he emphasizes the repetition rather than making it every time. So if you had a month blocked out, if you wrote down the days of the month and the specific habit that you wanted to try and commit yourself to for that month, try and tick it off every day. It's not about how well you do it on the day, it's just showing up that matters. So with the example of cold showering, let's say every day you want to do that in the month. If your aim is to have a full shower in the complete cold, like maximum cold blast shower, full shower, like let's say you want to be in there for 2 minutes or more perhaps, there's probably going to be a lot of times where you think, I'm not really feeling it today, I'll have a hot one instead. All you need to do is just show up. So it doesn't matter how proper of a shower it is. It doesn't matter if you go in, clean your whole body, you could stand in a cold shower for 1 second, and that's better towards your goal than not doing it at all. Another thing that I really like is the idea of habit stacking, which is where once you form a good habit, you can then combine it with a second one. An example in my own life that I do virtually every day now is after I've woken up, I will have a set time where I will try and meditate. After that meditation session is over, the first thing I do before I do anything else is gratitude journal. I'll write something that I'm grateful for. And because it's straight after the meditation session, I've got those two linked together, which means as soon as I do the meditation, I will then do the gratitude, because having them stacked like that just means you can accumulate more good habits. He also talks about how negative habits can be made less easy to do by creating something to just make it harder to reach. So for example, if you're trying to quit watching porn, you could stop yourself from even using, for example, social media, because perhaps that's your trigger. If you figure out what the trigger is, try and cut that out, and then you won't have the trigger that will then be the cue for you to then, just type up the yellow website, I'm just going to have a little look on there. No, if you cut out what's the trigger, then you're not going to get there in the first place. So for example, let's say on Instagram, you're scrolling on Instagram because you've got nothing else that you're doing at the moment, and then you see something that just triggers you. You see a half-naked girl, for example. Your mind goes straight to, I could find a lot of those much more easily. How about I just, I'm just going to look it up. It's that easy. If you try and cut out social media, or at least limit yourself on that, then that's an example where you're making it harder for your brain to be given that cue that will lead to the bad habit. The same goes the other way around if you wanted to do a positive habit. Say you want to drink more water. A lot of people give this example, which is where if you fill up a glass of water, leave it next to your bed, first thing in the morning, you'll have the water there, drink it. It's that easy. Just have it so that it's more convenient for you. If you can change what your environment looks like in order to benefit your good habits, that is a really good way of getting you there. So that's just a little idea of some of the things that you can find in this book. I would highly recommend it. If you're trying to break any bad habits, ones that you've been trying to break for a while and you just can't get to it, if you're trying to form new ones, maybe you're trying to get to the gym and you're just not getting in there consistently enough, I would recommend getting this book because it's just so full of good ideas. If you find this interesting, subscribe and leave me a comment if you want me to talk more in depth about any of the ideas, because there is a lot here that I could go into. Like, I barely scraped the surface of what is actually in the book, but generally it goes over a lot of good things about making and breaking habits that's just fundamental to changing who you are as a person, because that's where we start. We start the smallest little things, which then come together to create massive changes. So overall, very good book. Check it out if you fancy. And I will see you all, hopefully, very soon.